he's trying to do is basically have us experience some stuff, then back up a little bit, look at the theory behind it, so that we can kind of understand what it is we're doing, and then kind of go back. We're going to go back into some. We're going to spend about an hour and a half maybe finished up here today. The whole point would be basically for us to just finish up with some larger themes about. Kind of finish up the themes and then look for some stuff together that can take this forward for you guys. So, but before we go forward, is there any parts of the assumptions that you want to talk about or tease out or ask questions about?
Well, the hard part is the reality part of, okay, we don't have the finances right now. Right. So it's hard not to go there.
Right.
And how do you turn that around when the finances are really key for us right now? To turn it around into a positive spin. I mean, I know that you could say, well, we've got, you know, this amount of people, you know, about 60 people per Sunday. You've got people that give regularly. You've got about, you know, a certain number of families, small amount of families that give larger, you know, larger amounts. But we're not getting enough to be financially stable. So, you know, how do you turn that to be positive?
Yeah, you've got more people giving time and talent than money probably in our church.
Yeah.
Just because of the demographics of it.
Yeah, that's a great question, because the point here isn't to say let's turn that into a positive. The point is to say it's almost like the point is to say the way to get to that question, the way to get to that answer, is not to focus on that answer. But if we get to the right answer, that one will get solved, one way or another. That is the step of faith. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to look at, you know, not have a capital campaign or not talk about money. The point about it is this process is about, I think what this process does is it gives us so much more clarity about who we are as a church and what we're about, that I think then our financial conversations get more clarity, our fundraising gets more clarity, our expectations get more clarity. Because part of what we get to is that some of what we do with our money is built on other assumptions.
Right, and the struggle I have been finding is well, I have faith that God is in this thing. I have faith that we can go forward. But then I look at that and I go,
oh, yeah.
You know.
Well, I just, money is one of those interesting, I think money absolutely teases out our assumptions. Like, I'll give you an example. For years, we worked here with the assumption that this church would take about $2.5 million to afford it, plus we'd have a $500,000 debt on top of it, so we'd have to get to $3 million. Well, if that's not unreasonable based in the economics of 2005, 2006, or 2007. It's not unreasonable at all. As a matter of fact, if you look at some other churches, other larger churches, and you just compared us across and compared our demographics, everything points to, okay, you should have that. So if we drive with the notion that we should be a $3 million budget a year, and here's the reality, for the better part of 10 years, we've had $3 million a year between our capital campaign and our building campaign. That all just seems to make sense. Well, now the recession hits, and it hits hard, and that $3 million goes down to our income, our total income is around 2.7, 2.6. And it's really tempting to start making all your budgeting bases on the numbers coming in. But as we started doing our reformatting of who we are, we started realizing that this church probably has the potential of $2.6, $2.7 million a year. But what's changing dramatically is we don't need $2.5 million to run the ministry anymore. Now what do? We can run the ministry for about $2. And it wasn't, partly the necessity, the urgency, the heat was the recession. But at the same time, and this is what's so good for us, this is the reason why I feel like sometimes I can see it. We started this process of rethinking our church, of re-collaborating with our consultant before the money dropped. So we didn't do it as a response to the money. We started reorganizing because of the energy, because of that people with $100,000 to the good. We didn't have engagement. We started for that reason, not because we knew a recession was coming. So what was interesting is, in one sense, it helped us. We felt like, okay, we now look back and say that was the Lord. We started restructuring before. So unlike other churches who, like right now, I know 3 major churches that are doing major cuts one more time. we were ahead of the game, so we're not in as much pain, or we're actually financially pretty appropriate. So we made those cuts, but the urgency helps give us discipline. What I'm trying to do is separate out and say there is a conversation to have about what the church is supposed to be, and there's a conversation that has to have about our numbers, and that eventually those need to come together, and they absolutely need to come together in a practical solution. But it probably is going to be a reformatting of the future of the church, of the finances and the future of the church, the expectation level, and it will be, and that's part of the piece that it has to get to. But if you just focus on one of them, here's the number we need, then you don't get to do this other part. And if you just, and the whole point about this other part, that's why I did want to get to that outcome should be useful part, is this isn't done if some of these issues aren't attended to. You know, you don't want to have just, the whole point of having people tell stories isn't just because it's emotionally cathartic.
Feels so good.
Right, it's so good, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And I don't want to be, and I'm not, I mean, Steve knows me well enough to, I'm not one of these people who like puts on a happy face. I'm not one of these people sitting on the Presbyterian church going, you know, we really haven't lost numbers, we've gained partners. You know, like, if you really think of it, you know, I mean, I get so tired of having people say stuff like, you know, the Presbyterian church, really, we're the same size as Saddleback. Because if you put all of our churches together, on a Sunday morning, we worship the same as Saddleback. See, we're the same size. I'm like, stop doing that. Stop doing that. Like, I just think that's just living in denial. That's when I'm not talking about putting a positive spin on something that's a challenge. What I'm saying is looking at the challenge and saying our way to the challenge is in a different way. And here's the other way I think about it. If what you're doing isn't working, one of the systems issues is, if what you're doing isn't working, there are two things you cannot do. Number one, you cannot do nothing. If what you're doing is not working, you say, I'm not going to do anything, then it stays.
Right.
Number two is you can't keep doing what you've been doing.
Yep.
So I did some, so I remember when I was in this conversation, I said, so what do I do? I said, I don't care. Do anything else. Just don't do nothing, and don't do what you've already done. If you can't think of anything else to do, just do something else. I literally sat there and went, okay, so what if I stand on my head and I preach next week? Try it. See what it does? Because if nothing else, what you start doing is you start realizing what I'm trying to get to is a different way of being besides what I know, my defaults, which are to keep doing the same thing or to do nothing, to flee, do nothing, or to keep fighting, fight or flight. So I want to do something else.
Conversely, if you're doing something well, like VBS 2008, we should have probably continued in that model.
Well, see, what we want to do is, one of the questions I want to do is, this could be worth doing, is what you guys need to do is have some conversations about VBS 2008 and what worked. And not just what worked, but where's the life, where's the energy, what's the story behind it? Because I'll bet you the story includes the numbers, but it's probably more than the numbers. Like one of the things I think we do is we default to numbers. I heard Dennis say this, I don't mean to pick on Dennis, but, because he's not here, but I would if he was here. But he said if we had 130, we should have said 200. Maybe there's another way of metricing that. What was so exciting about that gave us an unexpected feeling about it, and how can we replicate that next time? You know, one of the pieces I heard you say, Joy, was we all work so hard together ahead of time. So maybe we could flip that whole thing and say, maybe our goal is to get an even more committed volunteer team
Planning.
and see what God does with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can change the focus by paying attention to the energy. And I have a couple of hunches already that we'll see the themes come out as we go. But because as I've been listening to it, I have this sense that there are these pieces of strengths that you guys have that I think, as you keep paying attention to them, I think you'll find some. So the key part that I want you to hear, Susan, is we're not talking about putting a positive spin on stuff. What we're talking about is trying to find a different way to that same outcome. And to be honest, if we don't get there, if we don't get a different outcome, then we didn't get it.
I think I understand that.